Weeks before the original lineup of Kiss played their final show together for almost 2 decades, fans witnessed the band unraveling on live TV. The band made a Halloween appearance on Tom Snyder's The Tomorrow Show, which perfectly shut off the growing tensions within the group. And the members knew the band was going to fall apart soon, and they tried to stop it, but of course things didn't work out. But how did we get here? Well, there always seems to be two camps in the band Kiss. You had the straight-laced and serious camp made up of bassist and rhythm guitarist, as well as co-vocalist Gene Simmons and Paul Stanley. And in the other camp, you had the duo that enjoyed the rock star life. They lived lives of excess. That frustrated the first camp. And that duo was made up of drummer and lead guitarist Peter Kriss and Ace Frehley. And when Kiss got their big break in 1975, following the success of their live album Alive, the band went into a creative and touring overdrive, working at a frantic pace. Between 1975 and 1979, Kiss released a total of 11 albums, including 2 live records, 4 solo records, which were marketed as Kiss releases, and 5 studio albums. Add to that a TV movie and thousands of pieces of memorabilia, and it's no wonder that the band members got sick of each other. With more success brought more distractions, and Stanley and Simmons felt that Peter Kriss and Ace Frehley's substance abuse issues, as well as their extracurricular activities, were impeding their contributions to the group, with one story seeing Ace Frehley skipping a recording session because he was too busy gambling. But Kriss and Frehley felt their bandmates would act like dictators when it came to their creative works, and by the end of 1977, Kriss and Frehley were tired of their bandmates and wanted to leave the group and pursue their own solo careers. And tensions aside, Stanley and Simmons knew they had to keep the band together and made a concession that in reality only delayed the inevitable. The band members took a break from one another, and during their downtime, each member worked on their own solo album that would be marketed together and share common artwork. And each solo album would count as half an album in the group's recording contract with their label Casablanca Records. And each of the solo albums would be released on the same day. In fact, the band's label was so enthusiastic about the release, they spent millions on marketing, believing that the albums could sell up to 5 million copies, when in reality, the albums collectively sold around 2 million copies. Now, what ended up happening is that fans of Kiss bought the solo album of their favorite Kiss member rather than each and every album. Now, one thing that had been overlooked by the band and their label was that they oversaturated the late 70s with too many Kiss releases. In early 1978, Kiss fans were asked to buy a greatest hits album called Double Platinum, and 5 months later, the 4 solo albums would drop. In addition to that, you had another Kiss album drop in the first half of 1979 called Dynasty. In addition to that, Kiss released thousands of pieces of merchandise, only further inundating the public with more Kiss than they needed. And with the 70s coming to a close, disco was still popular, and Paul Stanley wanted to capitalize on what was going on in the mainstream. In addition to that, Stanley was a frequent visitor of the New York hotspot Studio 54, and it would be those visits that inspired one of Kiss's biggest and most controversial songs, I Was Made for Lovin' You. In Stanley's 2014 autobiography titled Face the Music, he admitted, "I heard all these 126 beats per minute songs and listened to the lyrics, and he remembered in his book, I went home and set up a drum machine to 126 beats per minute and sat down and started I Was Made for Lovin' You." And the song would be a sharp contrast to the band's earlier hard rock sound, featured on songs like Detroit Rock City and Black Diamond. And Dynasty's second single, Sure Know Something, continued that trend of disco influences. And the band's changing sound didn't sit well with some of their longtime fans, including those in the Kiss Army. On top of the barrage of releases that fans would see in the late 70s, in addition to their made-for-TV movie Kiss Meets Phantom of the Park, the band's change in sound would be the last straw for some fans. Internally, though, what might have done more damage than anything was releasing the 4 solo records. Following the release of the 4 solo records, Kiss turned their attention to their next album, Dynasty. And according to drummer Peter Kriss, he had suggested to the band that they should use his own solo album producer, Vinnie Poncia, and as Kriss explained in his book Make Up to Break Up, that move would end up backfiring big time. He said, Paul immediately went to work on Vinnie. They started hanging out, Vinnie moved into Paul's apartment, and Paul poisoned Vinnie against me. Now, whether or not that's true, what did happen is that Kiss and Poncia decided that Kriss wasn't even fit to play on the album, and instead session drummer Anton Fig, who played on Frehley's solo album, would fill in on every track except Dirty Livin'. Fig's participation, though, was uncredited, with Kriss still appearing on the album's cover and joining the band on the ensuing tour. When it came time to tour in support of Dynasty, Kiss were in for a rude awakening. The same fans who bought their poppy singles weren't showing up to fill the seats of the arenas they were playing. and the band would end up spending a lot of money on their stage production for the tour, but the crowd sizes seemed to be shrinking, with Paul Stanley remembering in his book, saying, "It wasn't a good omen when our first show was cancelled. We had already gotten a few 2- and 3-night stands on our last tour in 1977, so what was next? More nights, obviously. Nope, fewer. The bottom got pulled right out from under us, and instead of getting bigger, we were getting smaller." Not helping all the turmoil on tour was what was going on behind the scenes. Infighting and production issues only further marred the tour, and one of the biggest changes the band soon noticed was a changing demographic of their audience, with Paul Stanley recalling watching fans file into the band's gig from his hotel room in one city, admitting, "I looked out the window and broke into a cold sweat. The line could have just as easily been for the circus. We had sanitized ourselves and were well on our way to extinguishing the fire that propelled us thus far." Now, following the tour, things would only get worse. Peter Kriss would be the first to leave the band of the original lineup, while guitarist Ace Frehley would be around for a couple more records as the band fell further into a career tailspin that wouldn't be changed until their 1983 release Lick It Up. And the band wouldn't reunite with its original lineup until 13 years later when the 1996 reunion tour.